corpsmen. Now, the Walking Dead is probably the most famous Marine battalion. It's the 1st Battalion, 9th Marine Regiment. And I basically was warned when I started getting training. I went to, after my corpsman training, I went to Camp Pendleton, and they started saying, whatever you do, don't get 1-9. And 1-9 was this battalion, because they'd already been wiped out. They lost about 70 or 80 men in one battle. 8 corpsmen were killed in that battle. That's when they were starting to warn me, don't get 1-9. So this is a picture of me, saying goodbye to my wife. We were married for 1 year before I left. And I keep getting asked the question, how come you have a Navy uniform? Well, I was a Navy. All of the doctors, lawyers, chaplains, nurses, and corpsmen are borrowed from the Navy, and they go through a shorter version of Marine training. You get a Marine uniform, you don't get the dress blues, but you are basically called a fleet Marine. So that's a picture of me in training. This kind of shows what they call a grunt. When you get it loaded up, you got to be out maybe for weeks at a time, so everything you need has got to be loaded up with you. This was right, get this, I go to Vietnam, and my first week that I'm there I'm in what's called the rear area, supposedly safe. It's not safe, by the way. So we got incoming, and I decided to run back to a bunker, and another corpsman was running back to the bunker, and he was killed. So I had a 50-50 chance that day. In my first week, that could have been a statistic. So go back one if you can. Well, never mind. The picture on that's me on the left with a helmet, and we're taking shelling at that moment. This was up on the DMZ, on the hill. It's called Contien, and very famous battles were up there. All the Lifetime, Newsweek guys were embedded with the battalion to take pictures of everything. So there's a Life magazine with one of our guys' face on the cover, and this was not the Life magazine. This was in the Stars and Stripes. That's me on the left with the helmet. And we're taking shelling, and I look up and see this reporter standing there taking a picture, and I thought, what an idiot. We're all ducking down. But then later I thought he was a genius when I saw the newspaper article. So I wrote to them, and they sent me the original clipping, and I expanded it. But most of these guys were killed later at the Battle of Quezon. This logo of one of the logos of our battalion. Just talking about, this shows the customary position when you're taking incoming. Try to make yourself small as possible. The unit that I was in has the record in the Marine Corps, the longest sustained combat of any Marine unit. Of all Marine units, we were there, that whole thing with Vietnam, there was a long period that the battalion was rotated in and out. You know, guys were there for years. The hill that I was on has the most incoming rounds on a small hill of any war the Marines have been in. One day, it was September 25, we had 1,200 rounds of enemy fire, which means when you get incoming, you don't just walk around. You've got to find a place quick to jump. And if there's already somebody in the hole, they don't mind if you jump in on top of them, because that gives them protection. So I found that many times I'd be walking, you hear a noise in the distance. They'd fire 2 rounds at a time usually, and it might be 10 or 20 miles away. You'd hear a thump thump, and then everybody yell incoming and go heading towards the bunker, hit the deck or something. Also, the battalion has a record of the most Marines killed in the Vietnam War. So you can see why they said don't get this battalion. It's really. But actually, I'm on the board of directors of the battalion. I'm the historian for them, and I'm basically collecting all the facts and stuff. Okay. That's the picture of the 1-9 guy. The Time magazine showed another picture of Contien. Now this is when I actually worked on my first wounded. This was shortly after that first picture which showed my bunker there. The command bunker took a direct hit. And I heard them yell, "Corpsman up." They just yell, and you're supposed to go wherever the damage is. I started working on a guy. He was sitting there with his eyes open, but he was already dead. I didn't even realize it because he was just looking at me. So that was my first patching up a guy. He was already dead. I go around the corner of the wall where he was, and I went down inside the bunker, and I was in the bunker working on wounded with another Marine, and both of us are today, we're still on the board of directors. He's the chaplain of the 1-9 Association. But anyway, this guy that we're pulling out, this was the senior corpsman, and I worked on him. He basically had a lot of wounds in his neck, and then the company commander was also hit, and I worked on him a little bit. But the senior corpsman died 8 hours later, and the company commander died 8 days later. So now this is the second time I'm replacing a corpsman that got killed. I wound up getting moved up to senior corpsman. I'm in charge of the whole company, and one of the good things is the radio man, Corporal Olson, said, "Doc," he said, "whatever I do, you do also," which is somebody that's experienced tells you something, you better listen. He says, "If I go around a bush, you follow my steps." So I literally followed in his footsteps, and I think that was a wise thing to do, because there was, punji pits. You've seen all the Rambo stuff, the pits, all the ways that they had one that was really cool. It was called a bouncing Betty, which you step on it, it bounces up about halfway to your waist and then blows you up, and it blows you in half. That's a bouncing Betty. Now, I don't know why they named it Betty. That's not very nice to the thing. So we crossed rivers. Basically, this was, okay, next one. This showing the caring for the wounded and stuff. And did you hear about that cruise ship that got stranded for 5 days? Must have been tough. That's kind of like, you don't realize how miserable it is being out in the bush. It's either too hot or too cold, and you're wet. In Vietnam, it rained more in one day than we get here all year. So you had to check the guys. That was part of the treatments. They would get their feet too long in the water. Okay, next one. This is the next place we went to was Quezon. This is the view from the airstrip. It was very dangerous to land a plane there. Pretty soon they weren't able to land. I got on one of the last planes out, and I was to go on R&R to meet Charlene in Hawaii, and I had to literally run to get on the plane while they were trying to hit it. You know that scene from the dinosaur movie? We said, "Must go faster," because you're looking out the back of this open plane, and these rounds are trying to hit this plane. So I was always nervous, even to the last day. I had this thought that I was in Vietnam. I knew I was going to die. I had a thought, and I knew I was going to die, so I didn't worry about dying. But when I got finally to the last day of my year in Vietnam, I'm sitting in the plane, and we're taking off, and I'm gripping the things. I'm thinking, okay, it's got to happen now, right? And it didn't happen. So I think it's a good thing it didn't happen, but it does leave damage to you. Okay, the Quezon was 77 days. Average was 300 per day. Where it was less at Contien. It was only 2 to 300, but 300 a day rounds. We were there 77 days. You can do the math. At nighttime, they would do attacks on the perimeter to test how much how much fire they got back at them. They were probing different sections. And they also told us, don't go to sleep. So I laid there with my 45 on my chest and had one eye open. And you were just listening because every 90 minutes around the clock, 3 B-52s were carpet bombing around us. So the reason they said don't go to sleep, I think meant you can't really get to sleep. So, okay, that's just our incoming. There's so many statistics about it, but each plane carried about 65,000 pounds of bombs. So it was pretty cool, but you are bouncing in your bunker when those things are dropping. And they came, I think the record was they came within 3/4 of a mile of the base. So the enemy was digging tunnels. They had miles of tunnels underneath us. That's me. See how happy I was to be there. Next one. The airstrip was like a junkyard after all the planes. They just pushed them to the side. It looked like a junkyard. One plane was coming in, and it had 54 Marines on it. It was hit, and all those Marines were killed. The corpsmen were on the plane also, so every time Marines go somewhere, they have the corpsmen. So next one, this was on this hill 64. It was a smaller hill outside the main perimeter, and the hill got overrun at night, and we had to go the next morning and retake the hill. So the enemy had captured most of the hill, and we had, as soon as I got into the trench line with the relief force, I started working on wounded, and I had to work on a North Vietnamese prisoner. And these are the guys that were killed from my first platoon, that first platoon I had been with. They were killed that day, and then 150 enemy bodies left behind. So this is a small hill, and you literally were crawling on bodies. And so my editor said, can you describe what it feels like? Because I'm not real good at emoting about, how did you feel? Well, let's see, I was hot, I was cold, and it was miserable. No, you gotta talk more about how you felt. Well, okay, when you're crawling on bodies, it's kind of squishy, but I'm still learning how to emote in the writing of it. And I notice as I'm writing the book, I tend to stop breathing. I'm typing as I'm writing, but I'm not breathing. So that's not the perfect way it's not the healthy way to write a book, but I got through it. I'm almost done, so I put a QR code. If you're interested in that, you can get the thing. So I have a thing I say that we have the hero gene that says that this guy up here, this won the Navy Cross, he brought a knife to a gunfight. What happened was, one of the battles, his weapon got hit, and it's dark, and all he had was his K-bar, his knife, and he had to go find his friends who the enemy was putting sticks in their wounds to torture them, to make them yell, so that somebody would come and they could shoot them. Excuse me. So he goes out in the dark, and he smells something, so he heads towards it. Now, he doesn't have a gun. He kills 3 or 4 guys with his knife. Then he hears the guy calling. This guy, Elijah, was yelling his name because they were on a machine gun team together. So basically, he goes out and kills some more guys and picks up Elijah and the machine gun and carries him back. And they're talking about making it a Medal of Honor. He just recently got it, so it kind of took a while for him to get processed. Okay. Basically, I think we have a hero gene in us. I know you guys probably realize that God put it in you to be a hero for everybody. And that's why you're doing this organization. So in Hawaii, it was very jumpy. I had a good Christmas, though. It was very nice accommodations. That was at another base after Quezon. And I thought of Los Compadres, when you guys surround yourself with those on the same mission as you. Okay. Real life Walking Dead. I wrote piss tube, and I realized that's not such a good way to describe it, but I was up at the a bunker for the battalion aid station, and I was taking a leak. They called it a piss tube. But I didn't get wounded in the piss tube. I heard 2 rounds being fired at me, mortar rounds, and I thought, oh boy, I'm out there without a helmet or flak jacket. And I basically headed back towards the bunker, but I got 3 tiny pieces of shrapnel in the back of my head. And all it gave me was a headache. The doctor couldn't even get it out. It was so small. So that's the extent of my wounds. I think I should have some applause just for that. And it's such a glorious story about the piss tube. Isn't that great? But, you know, when you talk about I was in combat and I was taking a piss. Anyway, the Vietnam War movie that I can relate to the most is Platoon. That's more like we had. And this is a picture of the wall. There's 58,320. And that's me at Da Nang, ready to go home. I've got, I was amazed I didn't die. Okay, PTSD. One day I'm driving on El Cajon Boulevard, and I hear a noise, and my friend is sitting in the car with me. I'm the driver, and I jumped under the steering wheel. That's how, when I first came back from Vietnam, I was so jumpy. I jumped under the steering wheel while I'm driving. So he said, Rod, put on the brakes. And I'm down there, oh, sorry. And I got up, but it was a sign for him. He was very nervous about riding with me after that. The toxic war, PTSD, then I wound up with cancer from Agent Orange. I almost died from that about 2008. I had 5 months of chemo down in La Jolla, and then I was flown up to Seattle for a bone marrow transplant. And that's me. I was showing you how happy I was. The bone marrow transplant is a brutal procedure, and that's me on the right after that procedure. So the photo. Okay, the theme is never give up. And after 1 year after the chemo, I wound up almost dying again from chickenpox because they gave me vaccinations back after the bone marrow transplant. So, okay. Veterans leave a war, but war never leaves a veteran. Okay. You see these veterans coming home, you're starting to see more of them. Our reception back in the 60s was not that great. This is a time I got to ride 57 years after the war. I got my parade. It was Stu. He took me in his car, so that was Veterans Day. And this is some of our guys. And the final thing I want to say, there was a movie. Have you guys seen Fury, the movie Fury with Brad Pitt as the tank commander? And one of the scenes in there, they basically, got 3 Sherman tanks on the U.S. against one German Tiger tank. And that thing was so tough that the rounds were bouncing off of it, and 2 of the tanks were taken out. And Brad leads them around to the back of this Sherman tank, or the back of the Tiger tank, and fires a round into the rear end, and it blows them up. And the guy jumps out of it, and he's on fire. And they say, shoot him, and then the other guy says, no, let him burn. So basically, it was just the real raw, fun stuff of war, One of the guys says, and the Lord said, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And I said, here am I, send me. And Brad Pitt said, oh yeah, that's Isaiah 6:8, or he knew the scripture. They all laughed because they thought, here is this Brad Pitt guy. And then so Brad says, this is the best job I ever had. And they all said, yeah, best job I ever had. So that's why it's on my card. So thank you guys, and I appreciate you letting me talk.
Was that 67 to 72 time frame?
I was there 67 and 68. Were you there?
Yep. Good. I was part of your air cover.
You're still here.
Yeah, good. I still got 8 more.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ryan, and welcome. All right.